welcome to the Garden Futures podcast from V&A Dundee. I'm Troy Nelson, and with each episode I'll be exploring the garden's relationship with design, people and planet, as seen in our latest exhibition, Garden Futures, Designing with Nature, which is open now until January 2026. In this episode we look at the connection between gardens and fashion through the life of Christian Dior. I'm joined by landscape designer and writer Elizabeth Tyler and Chief Curator and Director at Musée Dior, Brigitte Richart. Musée Dior, located in Normandy, France, are hosting the equally garden-themed exhibition Jardins Enchanteurs, which looks at the garden and the flower as a central part of the fashion house's identity. Here's Elizabeth.
Perched on a cliffside in the northwest of France sits Les Rams, a sea-facing villa hugged by a garden of winding paths and borders that, in the early 20th century, would inspire a young Christian Dior to transform the worlds of perfume and couture. I'm Elizabeth Tyler, a landscape designer and writer, engaged in what it means when design and nature collaborate, a subject which is explored in the V&A Dundee's exhibition, Garden Futures. With me to discuss the enduring influence of the garden is Brigitte Richart, Director and Chief Curator of the Musée Christian Dior, which is housed in that very same coastal villa. Brigitte, hello and welcome.
Hello, thank you.
Brigitte, for those of us listening, can you paint us a picture of Les Rams? What's it like to be there, and what do you see when you look out of the windows to the gardens?
When I look out of the window, I see the sea, of course, because the house and the garden is just over the sea. It's on the cliff just, and you are at the end of the stairs going to the sea. So it's on the rock, and you have a lot of vegetation. The house itself is just at the center of the garden, which is about 2.5 acres.
Wow.
So it's quite a huge garden for a family garden, but not a park. But a huge garden for a family one.
Gorgeous. Yeah, so the house is really enswathed by the garden then.
Exactly.
And so the villa was the childhood home of Monsieur Dior, and also now where Musée Dior is located. So it was a very important place to Dior and his family. Is that right?
Yes, it was a very important place. I'm convinced that the Dior chose this property precisely because of its situation just in front of the sea with this huge garden, because we know that Madeleine Dior, Christian Dior's mother, loved very much gardening, very much gardens. And we know that she had this winter garden just in front of the house, which is a room which made the link between the garden and the house itself. And we know that she had this room to enjoy plants inside the garden and to be protected from the rain, sometimes from the sun also. And so it's really a room when you can profit from the garden, benefit from the garden, and at the same time being protected from the weather, for example, from the meteorological conditions. So this garden was very important and probably explains the choice by the Dior of this property.
Oh, of course. That sounds absolutely beautiful, that space. I love those kind of indoor-outdoor spaces where, especially somewhere like Normandy, where maybe the weather, you sometimes have a bit more rain than in the south of France. You can sit and enjoy the greenery whilst also not getting wet. And how do we know, and what do we know about their time in the garden and what they were doing, and what Madeleine and Christian, when he was a child, were doing in the garden?
First of all, they had to make come a lot of soil on the rock, because it was very difficult to make grow all the trees and plants and roses and flowers we have now. Not exactly the same, of course, as at the time of the Dior, but because of the fact that we are on the rock, it was very difficult to make grow all these plants. And you have to imagine at the beginning of the 20th century that the house was quite alone among the property. It was quite like a moorland with nothing around, and they were quite isolated in their house and in the garden, and it became progressively a piece of nature. So we see that between 1905, when they bought this house, and 1925, Christian Dior was 20 years old, it became really a part of nature. So we know that it was very important for Madeleine Dior and his son Christian, that the garden was very important.
Oh, wow, that's quite a feat to create such a beautiful garden on a cliff, as you say. And thinking about this early influence on Monsieur Dior, obviously so formative for him, and thinking about how that was then expressed, obviously, when he sets up the house of Christian Dior. Which collection would you say was kind of the most identified with his love for gardens?
Of course, the first one,
Yeah.
we know that when he created what was called New Look, the two main silhouettes were corolla, referring directly to the flower, of course, and of course the line in 8, his favorite number, also referring to another shape of the body, of the female body. Of course, I would say that the first collections was very influenced by the garden. It reminded him of this garden of his childhood. And after that, of course, the nature was very present in all his creations. For example, another two very important pieces of the exhibition are the famous dresses Villemorin and Andrieux from the collections Summer Spring 1952. And these two dresses refer directly to what he was reading when he was a child. That is to say, the famous catalogs of the seed sellers. Sorry, it's a reverse. Villemorin Andrieux, which produced seeds, and he was delighted in reading these books. I could just give you an extract from his memories. He said, "A passion for flowers inherited from my mother meant that I was at my happiest among plants and flower beds. This passion even influenced my reading, and, with the exception of a few books which made their mark on my whole childhood, my chief delight was to learn by heart the names and descriptions of flowers in the illustrated catalogues of the firm of Villemorin Andrieux." So really, these two dresses, which have become very rare. We know that one in the Met in New York, I think, and also in the Museum of Art Décoratif in Paris. But except of these two examples, they are very rare, and they came for the exhibition from Italy, where one of my collaborators found them.
Oh, wow. Okay. Yeah. And I mean, those old seed catalogues themselves were so beautiful, weren't they? I mean, I think it's hard for us to imagine now seed catalogues often just people buy online, or it's much more utilitarian, but the typography and the illustrations would have just been so gorgeous. You can see how that would have influenced him. I think the new look, the impact of that on the fashion world, the fact that so much of the inspiration of that was taken from flowers, I just think is a really special thing. So we can really see the line from his love of plants and gardening when he was a child into adulthood and into his practice. Did that continue sort of right until the end of his life?
Yes, because until the end, until the last collections, we can see that the nature flowers very, very recurrent motif in the collections. Another flower, of course, very important, is the lily of the valley, related to this superstition, of course. But really, it's part of. I would say that this. I think you agree with that. That really, it's part of the identity of the brand. These flowers, and not only a decorative motive. I would add what is important in the garden, except the flowers. It's very interesting, I think, that you have a pond, this famous pond. It's quite little, a little pond inside the garden. And we know that Christian Dior designed this pond. When he was a young man, he wanted to be an architect. He designed some pieces of the garden, the pond, but also the pergola, and also some furniture, to my opinion, directly inspired by what you could see during the Universal exhibitions in Paris. Very quite modern, very simple, but very built at the same time. That is to say that in this garden you have the two components of what will be the fashion according to Christian Dior. This very architected, built collections, and the romanticism, the roundness of the flowers, the roses. For me, these gardens summarize in certain way the main elements of the fashion according to Christian Dior. You would say
Yes.
I'm quite partial, of course.
No, I think that's beautifully put, and it's a combination that I love so much as well when I'm creating gardens, is this combination of the hard with the soft. You can't have all these beautiful blousy flowers with no sort of clean edge to them to help define against. And it's exactly that beautiful combination of kind of a structure with a softness that, as you say, was expressed in this outdoor furniture that he designed that I'd love to see, but also then just so famously in the clothes that he designed. One thing I realized we haven't yet discussed is the perfume, obviously, that he created, which for the time I think was quite revolutionary, wasn't it? And how it was linked to the brand. And obviously the lily of the valley being quite important in that, and roses and jasmine. I wondered if you could talk a bit about that.
Yes, I'm also convinced that because of this vegetation, the flowers, trees, the plants, you have also you can smell really the garden when you come. And I'm because I'm every day in this garden. I open it in the morning at the very beginning of the day, and so you have some smells, and you have others in the middle of the day, and then others again at the end of the day. So I imagine that, like him, I can smell the different fragrances of the garden, and we can imagine that thanks to this smell, he could have been inspired for creating immediately a perfume. But of course, the fragrances of the smell of the garden, and the first garden in Granville, and then others after that in his other properties, influenced, I'm convinced, this idea of being also, like he said, a parfumer and not only a creator of fashion.
Which I think is beautiful. And clearly, I mean, he was just so talented across so many different fields of creativity, which is something I think is so interesting. But also, as he got more famous and there was such a hype around him, this sanctuary that the gardens created, and obviously perhaps that's not so present for the influence of Les Rames, but for La Colle Noire, which was his garden when he was in his later period. What do we know about the garden as a sanctuary and a place of retreat for Dior?
It's really an evidence, because he said that Granville was for 9 months of the year a peaceful little port, and for the 3 summer months a fashionable suburb of Paris. It's interesting. We know that in the first years of his life he spent full time in Granville, and then the family decided to go to Paris, and they come only for the summer. But he said when he was a child, for the other 9 months, as we were cut off on our property like an island, far from the commercial atmosphere of the town, we hardly saw anybody. This isolation suited my taste. So we know that he was a very contemplative boy. He was quite shy also, and he didn't like probably much people around him, except of course his brothers and sisters. So it was probably like a kind of retreat, as you said, as you mentioned, a way of being quiet, of thinking, of imagining. It was probably a very good place to develop his imagination. For example, when you are on the terrace just in front of the sea, you can have this view of, for example, the island of Jersey. Just it's we see a little piece of England from this part of the terrace. So really, and due to these high walls, you cannot see the sea precisely everywhere in the garden, but it's like a protected cocoon. So really, this Granville, this garden, this property, really, it was probably a very important place to retreat, to dream also of what will be his future.
Yes, and for those ideas to develop in a truly original way, away from the noise that might influence in other ways. I sort of think about being creative now with all the kind of noise of the internet and all of that. And not only did he not have to deal with that, but he also could go to this beautiful place and create something truly original with the new look, which obviously was so revolutionary for the time in fashion and its impact on fashion. And that's something I think is so interesting about a lot of creative professions, is obviously there's a time when you have to be in Paris, right? Presenting your couture shows and engaging with the press and really being very exposed. But then also you have to have that time when you're behind those high walls, looking out to the sea by yourself, able for those ideas to develop in the mind. And it sounds like he really understood that.
Yes, and we know that later on he was looking for properties in Milly-la-Forêt in the south of Paris, and later on in La Colnois. This was kind of properties where he could reminded him of Granville and these walls protecting him. And we know that there were also a pond much larger, of course, than this of Granville in La Colnois precisely. So he wanted to have some things reminding him of this atmosphere of Granville. You know that his memories is called Christian Dior and I, referring to the Christian Dior, very well known, the couturier with worldwide well known, and of course the man who loved to be in the intimacy of a very close friends and few friends, and to be also alone sometimes to create in these properties.
Yeah, so it sounds like these gardens were just so important for him as places to retreat to. And I was thinking about, it's one of the pieces that's lent to the exhibition at the V&A. It's the Kim Jones piece from the 2023 collection, I think, which is all centered on Charleston, which is obviously another retreat for these creative people and surrounded by this beautiful garden and,
yes,
sort of cut off from the hectic life of London. And also, I mean, they would have been contemporaries with Dior, the Bloomsbury Group. So I love that as a link. Just thinking, I know obviously your focus is on Les Rames and the Musée, but the way that influence of the garden and attention to nature has been continued through, do you think it's sort of a staple of the brand's identity now, has become that, has always been this love of gardens?
Yes, I think it has always been a very part of the identity, as I was mentioning. And I think of other examples than the one you mentioned with this show by Kim Jones, I was lucky to attend it. For me, it was really a shock because it was like I was inside my garden. Although it was really, but there were also the second show, I think, of Raf Simons. The women were just emerging in the garden rebuilt in the Jardins des Tuileries in Paris. And so there are a lot of examples showing that really the artistic directors are very close to this very first identity, deeply inside really the ADN. What would you say in English of the brand?
It's like the core.
Yes, exactly. Probably it was one of your questions, but some creators came in Granville. I was lucky to have here Maria Grazia Curie, before her also Raf Simons, and recently, last year, Francis Kurkdjian, who creates now the perfumes for Christian Dior, came in Granville. And of course, I forgot Stephen Jones, who had an exhibition in 2022. He was very keen on Granville, and he came several times and felt really, he found a kind of, it was very peaceful in Granville, and all them, at a certain moment, they said it was a dream, of course. And if I could settle just for a while, just here, and to create and to escape from the city, from the noises, from Paris, from London. So it was, they were in the foot, let's say, in the traces of Christian Dior in his garden, and they can feel like Christian Dior when he was in Granville.
And what an amazing resource to have as a designer of a historic house, that archival material that you can engage with, and not only the material that's, behind glass, but also the living, breathing garden right next to the sea in the house. I've worked with a few artists and designers of various kinds, and that engagement with their garden and having it as a place of retreat. I was looking also, Maria Grazia Chiuri's, obviously her first show was in the Rodin Gardens, and her last one also in more formal Italian garden in Rome. So it sounds like it was a very strong influence for her through her work. And I wonder what we can expect from the next phase of Dior. I love Jonathan Anderson's work, and from his past work, I have seen a link to gardens and landscape. He seems to be quite informed by it, but obviously there are a lot of influences to play with. So we'll see what happens. But I'm looking forward to that. What's the piece in the show that you have currently that you feel, or your favorite piece, or the piece that you feel sort of reflects the message that you're discussing in the exhibition the most?
It's always very difficult to answer this question. I have to choose between my children. I mentioned, of course, because they are very important, these two dresses, Villemot and Henrieux, of course. But also I can talk about dresses, very delicate work by Maria Grazia Chiuri. It was in 2017, I think. She inserted flowers between two layers of fabric, and it's very delicate. And really, this idea of flowers, but it's really referring to real herbariums. Though these are very delicate works with very light fabrics. The creator, of course, they respect the identity of the of Christian Dior inspirations, and of course, they bring their own creativity and their own way, their own look at the contemporary society, and of course of the clients. And of course, the creator also have to be part of their time, but also to have a distance. It must be very difficult for them to. But we know that nature, like a leitmotif, comes again and again in the collection of the Dior.
That's so beautifully put. Yeah, exactly. I was also thinking, as you were talking about the richness, the amount of fabric often that would be used in the skirts of the new look, and that celebration of, tactility that you couldn't have during, the Second World War in Europe, certainly. And the sort of celebration of, this is acres of silk, and the reveling in the luxury and the beauty of the materials, and that engaging with all of the senses, which a garden does so well, and which really beautiful fashion, also does, where you have the sort of the rustle and the feel and obviously the look, but it's just always, it always seems that it sounds beautiful, that collection you're talking about. I must come and see it.
I would say that more than ever, we want to show in this property that the house, really the importance of the garden in the life of Christian Dior, the first garden when he make really his first steps, that is in Granville, and the importance of the nature. He was very close to nature thanks to his mother Madeleine, and so we really want to make understand to our visitors how deeply attached are the house itself and what we present inside the house and the garden, and how important was really this influence of nature and what we show inside the house. It's very important too.
Yes, and the house and the garden working together as one is something that certainly in my work I'm always trying to achieve, so that you can flow through those spaces. And especially, like you say, if you have the garden surrounding the house, just being able to walk through these different rooms and not really realize whether you're in one or the other. It's so special for people to be able to come and see that and see all of the pieces you have there.
One of my dream would be to have more windows, making possible to see outside, but because of light and because of natural light, which is our enemy, of course, in presenting collection, it's very difficult. But otherwise, it's very difficult.
Yes, the practical constraints of, like you say, presenting. You have to sort of keep that light away, but also, I guess, wanting to have the feeling, and just balancing those two things must be difficult for you, but I'm sure it's all done very beautifully. Thank you so much, Brigitte, for this conversation. It was really lovely to talk to you about it.
It was a pleasure. Sorry for my English, that is not always very fluent. I do my best, but it was a pleasure, and I really would like to discover Dundee, the V&A in Dundee, because a few years ago we lent a piece of our collections, but I didn't have the opportunity to come, and really I would dream. And when I was seeing, I looked at the exhibition you have in Dundee now, and I saw a photograph in Africa showing a piece of nature, and around this piece of nature, the trees and all, I think it was quite the desert. And it made me think of the Garden of Granville, because it's the same idea, in fact. Yes, in fact, I really dreaming of coming to Dundee and to see the V&A in Dundee.
Yeah, Dior, the relationship between Dior and Dundee is growing. With that piece that you were talking about was the one of the, I think it was a tartan piece, wasn't it? And then that show in Drummond Castle that Maria Grazia Curie walking down the terraces. And
Yes.
I thought that was so striking and beautiful. So yeah, I'm sure this is the beginning of a long, lovely relationship. So I guess it remains for me to say thank you so much to Brigitte and everyone at the Musée Christian Dior at Les Rhums.
Thank you too.
Your exhibition, Dior Jardins Enchanteurs, is open at Les Rhums until the 2nd of November 2025. And the V&A Dundee's Garden Futures exhibition is open from now until January 2026. So lots of lovely time to go and see that. This podcast series is produced by Troy Nelson as part of the V&A Dundee's public programme. Do subscribe to keep up to date with new episodes, and please visit the website to find out what else we have coming up. Thank you very much and goodbye.
Thank you. Bye.